All right, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome. It is Thursday at 12 p.m. on the Eastern Seaboard, and you know that it is time to hang with Harley. Harley Schlanger is an individual who needs no introduction. He is the voice of reason on global geostrategic events that are happening all throughout the world and the latest news and all the information that is important to you. Without further ado, Harley, how are you, sir?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing great, man. I mean, last time we talked, I think you mentioned that you were somewhere in Europe meeting with some parliament or something.
Well, I just got back from Brussels where there was a very interesting meeting at the European Parliament yesterday
Yeah.
by mostly Italian members of the parliament who are quite incensed at the way the European Central Bank made an exception to their rules for these two Italian banks, where they said the government could do a bailout provided there was also a bail in. And so these two banks from Venice essentially stole between 30 and 40% of the holdings people had in bonds. The reason they went to bonds is because they're making nothing on interest in their savings. And the two banks then were taken over by other banks. The debt was taken, the bad debt, non performing debt, was taken over by the government in essentially a bad bank. And so what you see is that the European Central Bank has no policy except to collapse these smaller banks and divide their good assets among the big banks, letting the big banks take them over. Like Santander took over the Banco Popular in Spain for €1. They paid €1 to get the good assets of that bank. The bad assets were put into a so-called bad bank. So we had a group of economists from mostly from Italy speaking about what's the alternative to the euro. And the most interesting presentation was by an Italian economics professor, Bagnai, who
Hmm.
said that the problem is that the European Union built a hotel with no fire exits. And their view is that you can't even consider leaving the euro because there is no alternative. So
Right.
therefore, you have to assume that everything will work out. And what
Wow.
he pointed out is that if Italy went back to the lira at present interest rates, within a year they'd be back up to 4% GDP growth. And,
Wow.
under, and under the worst case, if they had to raise the interest rates to 2 or 3%, it might take 3 years to get up to that level. But he said the other, if you don't change it, you're going to go in the other direction, continue to collapse. And what was interesting is that among the people who were there was the leader of the Lega Nord, which is the party that became the leading opposition party in the municipal elections last week. And while they're a little, let's just say, a little populist without a real program on the economy, they are pushing to leave the euro. And so it was an opportunity for me to speak and also to at their event and also to meet people and discuss with them. Also, the woman who's the new CEO of Leave Europe in England was there, and I had a chance to talk with her some on what's the post-Brexit strategy for the United Kingdom.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting. And of course, it occurs on the week before the G20 are meeting, and there's so much going on, V.
Yeah.
Uh, Xi Jinping is going to be in Moscow this week, and then he's going to be meeting with Germany's Merkel. Who knows what will happen with that one? The Germans are trying to convince the Chinese that their future is with working with Germany and producing renewable fuel systems. But the Chinese, they want to clean up their environment, but they also want to keep building. They don't want to go under a zero growth plan for the sake of the environment because they don't
Sure.
think you have to sacrifice the environment to have growth.
Correct.
There'll also be, hopefully, meetings between Trump with Putin and also with Xi Jinping. And Trump had a meeting with Modi, the Indian prime minister, and afterwards the Indian foreign minister, who was at the meetings with Modi and the other Indian prime ministers with the last three presidents, said this was the most successful meeting they've had. And so I'm writing an article now on what Mr. LaRouche said in 2009 when he gave a speech at a forum in Greece, where he said that if Russia, India, China, and the United States come together in a pro-growth development perspective, this would end the old financial imperial system.
Right.
And it would create the basis of a new, just economic order.
Right.
Based on production. So I think we're seeing that come together. LaRouche's bold proposal at that moment. The only thing that's not on target is in the United States, you have Trump saddled with a group of Republicans and a rotten group of Democrats who won't budge on any economic issues. And so I think he's got to make the effort to get the strategic situation under control completely this week, and then come back and basically read the riot act to both the Democrats and the Republicans, drop this Russian crap. Let's get together and figure out what we can do to have the United States take maximum advantage of the potentials, not just in working with China overseas, but working with China in the United States. I don't know if you saw the interview with Jack Ma that was in Detroit with the PBS guy. I can't remember right now the name of the guy. But anyway, it was fascinating because what he was talking about is, look, the future is going to be faster. Commerce, e-commerce is changing everything. The potential for global cooperation is there. It sacrifice your own economy. And he said, we can create an economy that's twice as big in a short period ahead if we work together. And this was to a group of Detroit entrepreneurs, and you can't imagine a more beaten down group than Detroit entrepreneurs, and they were cheering wildly. So I think we're on the verge of something big, and I think that's also why you had this line come out the other day that there was evidence Assad was preparing to use chemical weapons.
that train's never late, Harley.
Well, you know, and look at the timing, right before the G20 summit, before the meeting will finally take place between Trump and Putin. I don't think some people want that to happen, that meeting to happen.
Oh, absolutely.
But General Mattis said on his way to Europe that, quote, the Syrians seem to have pulled back from the plan, unquote. So the same anonymous sources that claim that Trump was elected by Putin hacking obviously have people deep inside Syrian intelligence telling them that Assad is planning a non-existent chemical attack.
Right. Exactly. You got to excuse the background noise. I literally have the Blue Angels flying over me right now. They're in New York, so it's pretty.
It's better
loud. Go ahead, Harley. I'm sorry.
I said better than the Blue Devils.
Yeah. Exactly.
I think they're the ones who are watching Assad's forces mix chemical weapons.
Yeah, they're the ones because they're literally Assad's forces are right outside of the Assad's presidential offices, mixing chemical weapons out in the open in front of everybody. That's how we know it's them.
With Putin over Skype giving them the recipe.
Exactly. Yeah. And Xi Jinping providing the materials.
and Trump saying, go ahead, make my day.
That's it. That is, in essence, the liberal establishment neocon worldview in a nutshell. Right there.
Well, it shows the complete lack of a perception of either the reality among the electorate, but also what's happening in the world. Another conference I attended the other day was a discussion of China in Africa. And the African leaders were so enthusiastic about what China's doing. And they said, look, we're perfectly willing to work with the United States also, and Europe. But they say the United States right now is mostly under Obama was sending soldiers to Africa. But Europe is sending people to essentially try and put handcuffs on African nations by saying they have to adopt IMF, World Bank transparency laws. And you know, where were those transparency laws when Deutsche Bank was writing phony mortgages?
Sure.
So the Africans have a sense that the whole purpose of the European intervention is to stifle development, except for selling solar panels and windmills.
I mean, Harley, we all know you can build a vibrant industry and economy on solar panels and windmills.
Well, as long as you have huge government subsidies.
Right. Unless your name is Tesla. Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Solar City. Correct. I mean, haven't we learned anything from the Spaniards who decided to create a green economy, and for every job they created in the green economy, eviscerated 5 to 10 jobs in the physical real economy?
Well, the interesting thing about this discussion of the Italian situation is that what they were talking about is that Mario Draghi, who is Italian, who's now the head of the European Central Bank, was the architect of the banking laws in the early 2000s when he was at the Bank of Italy that allowed these banks to grow big and engage in derivative speculation. Uh, they took over other banks based on false reporting that the other banks had to be shut down. So they grabbed the assets. They used the asset grab to get new infusions of credit.
Yeah.
And now they're sitting on piles of non performing loans. And so the solution is to let the bigger banks, who are the most bankrupt, take over the smaller banks, which actually are in pretty good shape, but can't compete.
Right.
And so they're being put under, so their assets are available at a fire sale.
Sure.
And in the meantime, uh, 1 out of 5 Italians doesn't have a job. It's about 18%, but it's close to 30% with the youth unemployment.
Hmm.
So it's at Greek levels.
I mean, that's what you got to do. If you want to be part of the exclusive club called the EU, Harley, that's just the price of admission.
And these economists, I don't have the quotes in front of me, but there was one who taught at Harvard, taught at Oxford, who wrote a book in 2011
Yeah.
about why the euro wouldn't succeed.
Hmm.
And what he was saying is that what you see is that every mistake that could be made has been made. And what have they learned? They double down and make the same mistake again. And he was one person who said that Italy would be much better off going to the lira. And if Italy did it, then Greece would pull out, probably Spain would pull out. England's already out.
Yeah.
So you'd be left with a couple of countries, France and Germany,
Are you talking
that,
about Joseph Stiglitz?
oh no, no, not, it was Stiglitz wasn't there.
Okay.
His name was Moynia, I think it was.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, now I know that name does ring a bell. Monya. Okay, cool.
Yeah, he wrote a book in 2011, then another one in 2014. But he was very clear on this. He basically said that you had such uneven levels of development in the southern part of the euro from the northern part that there was no way that you could merge them unless you had a 5 to 10 year strategy for developing the southern part. And instead, what they did is they saddled the southern part with debt to allow them to uh, issue government bonds that will never be paid.
Yeah.
And so that's the strategy. And one of the things I talk to people about is the fact that Hamilton dealt with that problem with the idea that you're going to increase manufacturing, you're going to increase the value added production of an economy so that people in the poorer areas will have their consumption levels raised by the fact that they're going to start earning real wages.
Right.
There's a very fascinating presentation by a Italian professor who's been in China for 10 years, where he said the per capita wage in China has gone up 100 times in the last 30 years. That is 100-fold. And he said, sure, they started at a low level, but he said they're actually in a situation where they can end poverty in China in 3 years.
Wow. I mean,
And are they doing it?
right.
Speculative bubbles? No, they're building.
Yeah, they're creating a physical economy versus us, which our physical economy it's dead. It's flatlined a long time ago. We have electronic duct tape that holds up the virtual economy, And then the physical economy, the people are fed false metrics that comes off a fake EKG machine saying, hey, look, the patient's alive. Well, there really is no pulse whatsoever.
But they're still pumping blood into it.
There is.
Yeah.
Pumping blood into it.
Blood and oxygen into a corpse and then painting its cheeks and saying he looks better.
He looks better. He looks much better. It's a big improvement.
Yeah.
Unreal.
Well, and you know, we laugh at this, but people's lives are being lost. Between Obamacare and whatever else, I don't know what you think about it, but this Republican policy is just as bad as Obamacare, if not worse, uh, because they start with the wrong assumption. They start with the assumption that you have to go to the private market insurance operations to fund healthcare.
Yeah.
And insurers make money by restricting their payments and letting people die rather than give them care. And if you subsidize people on a level that will give money to the insurance companies, but doesn't give them insurance to cover if they actually need health care,
Yeah.
then you're killing them.
Right.
And the bottom line is the insurance companies are complaining and they're moving out of the marketplace, but they made a killing. We saw the mergers last year, the huge amount of cash on hand at United Healthcare and Cigna and these other companies. They were squawking all the way to the bank.
Yeah, exactly correct. It's and this year they're pulling out of all these states because it's an absolute disaster.
Because the Obamacare was never meant to do anything for health care, and also it was a short-term fix for insurance companies.
Yeah.
That had nothing to do with improving the health situation. And the fact that Obama's gloating that the Republican bill is bad. Well, Obama's bill was the original Republican bill. It was drafted by Stuart Butler at the Heritage Foundation and then laundered through Mitt Romney in Massachusetts. Obamacare should be called Romney Care.
Correct. And it's the same architects. It's the same system, same architects.
Yeah. And for all the fuss about it, Sarah Palin was right by saying that these are setting up death camps or
death panels. Yeah, death panels.
Yeah.
1000%. That's what happens when you got bureaucrats who just look at things from a very technocratic perspective.
Well, you're 72 years old, you're having kidney failure, your expectancy, if we take care of you, is 3 or 4 years, but you're going to be restricted, is what you can do. So you're better off dying. Let's save the money to take care of someone else. But it's not going to take care of someone else. It's going to buy an extra yacht and a boob job for an insurance company.
Right. Exactly. Very well said. Harley, we got about a minute left. Your closing comments as well as how people could stay on top of your work.
People should watch very closely the developments between now and next Friday when the G20 summit opens in Hamburg. And I say that somewhat guardedly because the crazy Black Bloc and anarchists and others are trying to sabotage Hamburg so the conference won't take place.
Right.
But what could take place there is a realignment of global economic policy. If Trump follows through on his meetings with Modi, his discussions with Xi, and then hopefully a cooperation with Putin, we could be on the verge of getting out of a paradigm which has collapsed and which very few people will miss.
Right.
So go to LaRouchePAC.com. We'll have quite. I was denied press credentials, by the way, by the German government to go there.
Huh.
Not quite sure why. I think it's maybe I've written some things that are too favorable about the United States, even in our decrepit post-Obama state.
Right.
But earthpack.com, go there and we'll have updates, videos, and commentary on what's happening at Hamburg. And in the meantime, just keep an eye open for provocations like false flag chemical attack in Syria. Lavrov said that the United States claiming that there's going to be a chemical attack is an invitation to the terrorists to launch one.
Correct. Absolutely. Absolutely correct. Because we all know as soon as there's a chemical attack, it's not the terrorists who get hit, it's Assad's forces who are fighting the terrorists that get hit.
Yeah,
it's right. Absolutely deplorable. It's disgusting.
Yeah.
Harley, thank you so much for being on and sharing these important views with us. We really appreciate it. We hope that you have a safe time over there in Europe and that you will join us again next week. And folks, thank you all for listening in. We'll be back again same time next week. Thank you all. Have a good one. Bye-bye.